The serene early morning at Fort Harrison was shattered when the sky was streaked with incandescent trails, an ominous prelude to an unforeseen catastrophe. Each streak culminated in a violent impact that shook the ground like tremors, as pods from the alien fleet of Zaltrax made planetfall. Lieutenant Mark Vincent, who had been sipping a lukewarm coffee while poring over routine surveillance reports, rushed to the observation deck, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and adrenaline. As the dust settled around the impact sites, the pods, metallic and oblong, cracked open like seeds. What emerged were not exploratory robots or armed troops, as one might expect from an advanced alien civilization, but grotesque monstrosities that seemed torn from the pages of a horror novel. These warbeasts, towering behemoths with mottled skin and an array of sharp, spiny protrusions, roared defiance into the morning sky, their cries chillingly non-human. Mark snapped into action, his training overriding his shock. He barked orders into his comms, rallying his squad. All men and women trained for combat but unprepared for an adversary of this nature. Squad Delta, form up. Defensive positions around the East Ridge, and I need eyes up top. Whatever you can see, I need to know, now. The squad responded with commendable speed, assembling their heavy weaponry as they took cover. Mark coordinated positions, making sure every approach was covered. The beasts were haphazardly rampaging, testing their newfound freedom and the limits of their own strength, which gave humanity its first, slim advantage. Using the base's PA system, Mark addressed every able-bodied person within the sound of his voice. This is not a drill. We are under attack by unknown hostile entities. I repeat, this is not a drill. Arm yourselves, find shelter, and await further instructions. Even as he maintained a veneer of calm, Mark's mind raced. The creatures had some weaknesses. They were ponderous, their size making them slow on uneven terrain, and they seemed irritable by loud noises and rapid movements. Quickly devising a makeshift battle plan, he decided on guerrilla tactics. Hit and run, Delta. Use your mobility against them. Draw them into the choke points we've set up. He instructed his team as they began their assault, exploiting every opportunity to strike at the creatures' seemingly less armored underbellies and joints. As Mark led from the front, dodging a swipe from one beast's razor-edged limb, he saw firsthand the effectiveness of their small arms fire combined with the heavy artillery brought to bear from the fort's armory. Each beast's downfall brought a cheer from the human defenders, but Mark knew this was just the beginning. In the chaos, a distress call from the town below crackled over his radio. The beasts were not confined to the area around the fort. They were spreading out, and the civilian population was in direct danger. Mark made a split-second decision. Charlie team, with me, we're heading into town. Delta, continue to hold the perimeter. These things are not invincible. Mark's voice was a clarion call to those who might otherwise falter. As he and his team mounted the armored vehicles and sped towards the town, he steeled himself for the battles ahead. This was humanity's first contact with the Zaltraxian warbeasts, and it was a baptism by fire that would not soon be forgotten. The ride to the town was tense, punctuated by the distant roars of the warbeasts and the sporadic bursts of gunfire from the fort's defenses. Mark's vehicle, filled with a mix of veterans and new recruits, rumbled down the makeshift path, dust and debris kicking up behind them. Each soldier was armed to the teeth, their faces a mixture of determination and fear. As they approached the town, the scale of the devastation became apparent. Buildings had large, gaping holes, streets were torn up, and vehicles were overturned and burning. The beasts had rampaged through the area, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Positions, everyone. Snipers, take the high ground. Medics, set up a triage area in the community center. The rest of you, with me, Mark commanded as they disembarked. His voice was calm yet authoritative, cutting through the chaos like a knife. The town's inhabitants were in a state of panic, running from shadows and noises. Mark grabbed a megaphone from the vehicle and stood atop a broken wall, addressing the crowd. Listen up. I'm Lieutenant Mark Vincent of the United States Army. We're here to protect you and fight back these creatures. I need everyone to remain calm and follow our instructions. We have a plan, and we can keep you safe. His words seemed to have an effect. The crowd's panic subsided slightly and people began to listen more intently. Mark quickly organized the civilians into groups, sending them to various safe zones he and his team quickly secured around the town. Meanwhile, the soldiers began setting up defensive positions. They placed mines and traps in strategic locations, and heavy machine guns were stationed at key points that offered wide fields of fire. Mark coordinated with other military units in the area, forming a network of resistance against the Warbeasts. Suddenly, a lookout shouted, "Contact 3 o'clock." A group of beasts attracted by the noise and movement was heading straight toward the town's main square. Mark grabbed his rifle and sighted down the scope. "Hold your fire until they're in range," he instructed his squad. "Aim for their joints and eyes. Soft targets." As the beasts lumbered into the kill zone, the air was filled with the deafening sound of gunfire. Bullets and grenades found their marks, tearing through the tough, scaly skin of the creatures. The beasts roared in pain and confusion, some retreating while others charged blindly at the source of their pain. Mark moved among his troops, providing cover fire and shouting encouragement. "Stay sharp, keep them at bay." His leadership galvanized the soldiers, who fought with renewed vigor. After a grueling hour, the immediate threat was repelled. The bodies of several war beasts lay strewn across the square, a testament to the soldiers' bravery and effectiveness. Mark surveyed the scene, his chest heaving with exertion. He knew this was only the beginning of what could be a prolonged conflict, but this small victory bolstered the spirits of everyone involved. "Regroup and resupply," Mark called out to his team. "We need to be ready for the next wave." He then turned his attention back to the civilians, ensuring they were safe and accounted for. His actions not only demonstrated tactical acumen, but also a deep commitment to protecting human lives. As the sun set over the devastated town, Mark and his squad prepared for a long night. They would continue to hold their ground, knowing that the survival of humanity might well depend on their resolve and resilience. In the command center hastily set up in the fortified high school gymnasium, Mark Vincent stared down at the satellite images and troop deployment maps spread across the makeshift table. The war beasts' attack patterns were erratic, suggesting they were not guided by any strategic intelligence but driven by a blind, destructive instinct. This was both an advantage and a liability. It meant the beasts could be predicted to some extent, but also that they were unpredictable in a crisis. General Harris, overseeing military operations from a remote command post, was on the screen briefing Mark and his team. "Lieutenant, based on your reports and what we've gathered, it's clear these creatures are only the first wave of an attempted planetary invasion. We need to strike back hard and fast." Mark nodded, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. "General, I recommend we initiate Operation Steel Strike. We've identified several clusters of these war beasts that seem to act as central nodes for their attacks. If we can take these out, we might disrupt their coordination and slow down their spread." The general agreed. "Make it so, Lieutenant. I'm authorizing the use of our experimental pulse rifles and exosuits. We need every edge we can get." Hours later, Mark and his squad, now outfitted with the latest in military technology, moved out under the cover of night. The exosuits enhanced their strength and speed, allowing them to carry heavier weapons and equipment. The pulse rifles, capable of emitting concentrated blasts of energy, were particularly effective against the thick hide of the war beasts. Their target was a large industrial complex where satellite imagery had shown a significant concentration of beasts. As they approached, the air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt metal and flesh, a stark reminder of the ferocity of their enemy. Using a combination of drones and scouts, Mark's team mapped out the location. The beasts seemed to be using the complex as a sort of nesting ground, with younger, smaller creatures guarded by larger, more aggressive adults. "Okay, team, listen up," Mark briefed his unit, his voice low but clear. "We go in hard and fast. Alpha team will take point and draw their attention. Bravo, you're on flank duty. Keep them off Alpha's back. Charlie, you plant the charges. We blow this nest and get out before they even know what hit them." The operation commenced with precision. Alpha team, led by Mark, stormed the front gates, pulse rifles blazing. The beasts, caught off guard, responded with a chaotic fury, but the humans' superior tactics and firepower slowly pushed them back. Meanwhile, Bravo team successfully kept additional beasts from encircling Alpha, picking off the creatures that strayed too close. Charlie team made its way to the core of the complex, planting explosive charges around the main structures. Just as the last charge was set, a massive beast, larger than any they had encountered before, burst from one of the buildings. It roared, a sound so powerful it shook the ground, and charged at Alpha team. Mark, assessing the situation with lightning-quick judgment, redirected his unit's fire toward the charging behemoth. "Concentrate all fire on that thing. Aim for the head and chest," he shouted. The air crackled with the discharge of pulse rifles as concentrated beams of energy struck the beast. It faltered, stumbled, and then fell, just feet away from Mark's position. With the main threat neutralized, Mark gave the order to retreat. "Charlie, blow it," he yelled into his radio. Seconds later, the complex erupted in a series of deafening explosions. Fire and debris filled the air, and the ground trembled under their feet as they made their escape. Back at the command center, Mark and his team watched the satellite feed as the fire consumed the Warbeast nest. It was a significant victory, but as reports of other nests came in, Mark knew this was only the beginning of a long and arduous campaign. Yet, this victory had shown them all an important truth. The beasts could be beaten. And with each battle, humanity was learning, adapting, and getting stronger. Mark felt a surge of hope. They would take back their planet, one fight at a time, as the sun rose over a scarred landscape. The smoke from the last night's destruction mingled with the dawn mist. Mark Vincent, his face set in grim determination, prepared his team for the most daring part of their campaign yet, penetrating the primary hive of the Warbeasts. Intelligence gathered from the previous raids revealed that the beasts were not merely invading. They were mutating Earth's own fauna into grotesque soldiers for their war effort. This hive was the epicenter. The team gathered for briefing, their faces a mixture of fatigue and resolve. Mark outlined the mission with clinical precision. "This hive isn't just a nest, it's a factory. Our objective is to get inside, collect data on how these creatures are mutating our wildlife, and destroy it. We do this right, we might just turn the tide of this war." Equipped with environmental suits to protect against the biohazardous conditions inside the hive, the team moved out at 0400 hours. The hive was located in what used to be the lush Green River National Park, now a desolate war zone where twisted vegetation and mutated animals prowled under a perpetual cloud of alien spores. As they approached the hive, the air grew thicker, filled with a fetid smell that made even the filtered air in their suits stale. The hive itself was an organic structure, pulsating with life, grotesquely beautiful with its bioluminescent pathways and eerie otherworldly noises. Mark led his team through the main entrance, a gaping maw lined with sharp, bony ridges. Inside, the walls throbbed softly, as if the hive itself were breathing. "Stay sharp," he whispered into the comms, his voice barely concealing his disgust and fascination. The interior was labyrinthine, with tunnels branching off in every direction. Mark's team deployed drones to map their route and provide a live feedback to command. The deeper they went, the more surreal their surroundings became. They encountered Earth animals, horribly mutated, patrolling the corridors as if guarding their new master's lair. Using a combination of stealth and force, they neutralized these sentinels. Their biologist, Dr. Emily Santos, collected samples of the mutated tissue. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," she reported, her voice tense. "The DNA is completely rewritten. These animals are being turned into biological weapons." Finally, they reached the core of the hive. It was a vast chamber, with a ceiling lost in shadows illuminated by a sickly green light. In the center, a massive bioengineering station bubbled and churned, surrounded by pods containing half-transformed creatures. "This is it," Mark said, his voice a mix of horror and resolve. "Set the charges around the chamber. Let's end this nightmare." As they planted explosives, they were suddenly ambushed by a swarm of defender beasts, larger and more ferocious than any they had faced before. The battle was brutal and desperate. Mark and his team fought back to back, their weapons lighting up the chamber as they made a stand. With the defenders holding them at bay, Mark made a critical decision. "Fall back. I'll cover the detonation point. Go." Reluctantly, his team retreated towards the exit. Mark, standing alone in the heart of the enemy stronghold, triggered the explosives. The last thing he saw before the blast knocked him unconscious was the ceiling of the chamber collapsing, burying the bioengineering equipment under tons of rubble. Hours later, Mark awoke in the medical bay back at the command center, his team safe and the mission a success. Dr. Santos's samples would provide vital intelligence for developing countermeasures against the mutations, and the destruction of the hive dealt a significant blow to the Warbeast's capabilities. As he rested, recovering from his injuries, Mark felt a mix of relief and weight. The war was far from over, but today they had struck a real blow against the darkness. This victory was a testament to human resilience, and it rekindled hope across the globe. Humanity was not just surviving, it was fighting back. With the destruction of the primary hive, A wave of optimism swept through Earth's defense forces. The intelligence gathered by Mark and his team provided crucial insights into the enemy's methods, sparking rapid developments in countermeasures and weaponry designed to target the specific vulnerabilities of the Warbeasts. Meanwhile, news of the Hive's destruction boosted morale across the globe, showing that victory was possible. Mark, now largely recovered from his injuries, was called to a high-level briefing with international military leaders. The room was filled with screens showing various fronts of the conflict, each now slowly turning in favor of Earth's forces. General Harris opened the briefing with an acknowledgement of Mark's role. Lieutenant Vincent's bravery and leadership have opened a new chapter in this conflict. We now know how these creatures operate, and more importantly, we know how to stop them, the general declared, turning to Mark. We're initiating a global offensive, Operation Dawnbreaker. Lieutenant, you will coordinate one of the primary assault teams. Mark nodded, understanding the weight of his new responsibility. The operation was a series of coordinated strikes against remaining beast strongholds around the world, using newly developed electromagnetic pulse (EMP) weapons that disrupted the alien bioengineering technology. Equipped with the latest tactical gear, Mark led his team across various theaters of war, from the dense jungles of South America to the frozen wastelands of Siberia. Each campaign was tough, with the beasts adapting and fighting with desperate savagery. However, the humans were relentless, their spirits buoyed by each victory, their tactics sharpened by each encounter. In Brazil, Mark's team encountered a stronghold where the beasts had begun to mutate local wildlife into venomous predators. Using the EMP devices, they disabled the alien tech, reverting the mutations and liberating the area. Each member of his team had become a specialist in their own right, handling the new technology with expertise that made Mark proud. The turning point came during a major offensive in Russia, where a large cluster of warbeasts guarded what intelligence suggested was a secondary command center for the alien invasion. The battle was fierce, with heavy casualties on both sides, but the precision and coordination of the human forces gradually overwhelmed the beasts. As the command center was captured and its data seized, a clear picture of the alien strategy emerged. The Zaltraxians were losing not just in terms of territory, but also in operational capacity. Their invasion, initially overwhelming in scope and force, was now faltering under the sustained human counterattack. The news spread quickly, energizing troops and civilians alike. Celebrations were tempered with remembrance for the fallen, but a palpable sense of hope filled the air. Humanity was not just defending, it was reclaiming its future. In the aftermath of these victories, Mark found himself at a makeshift memorial for the soldiers lost in the conflict. He stood there reflecting on the cost of this war, the lives changed forever, and the world that would need rebuilding. His resolve hardened. This war would be won, not just for survival, but for the legacy of those who had fallen. As he prepared for the next phase of operations, Mark felt the unity of purpose that had emerged from the chaos. Countries and cultures previously divided by petty disputes were now united under a common cause. This unity was perhaps the true victory born from the ashes of conflict, a testament to what humanity could achieve when faced with extinction. With Operation Dawnbreaker moving into its final stages, the world watched and waited, ready to support their heroes on the front lines as they fought to ensure that this threat would never darken Earth's skies again. The Zaltraxian forces, now clearly on the defensive, resorted to their most desperate measures yet. Under the cover of a dark, stormy night, they deployed a new breed of warbeasts, far more lethal and cunning than their predecessors. These creatures were designed not only to fight, but to instill terror, capable of camouflage and armed with neurotoxic claws. The sudden escalation caught Earth's forces off guard, leading to devastating initial losses. Mark Vincent, stationed at a forward operating base near what used to be the outskirts of New York City, received the distress calls from several units ambushed by these new enemies. Reviewing the incoming data, his expression hardened. The war had taken a new turn and they needed to adapt quickly. "Get me all the footage you have on these new beasts," Mark demanded, turning to his intelligence team. As the videos and reports came in, his strategic mind raced through possibilities. The new warbeasts were not invincible, they had weaknesses. Their reliance on stealth could be turned against them with the right technology. Mark assembled a specialized team, drawing from the best of his troops and equipping them with infrared scanners and enhanced sonic weapons designed to disrupt the beasts' nervous systems. We're not just going to defend, we're hunting these creatures down, Mark declared, setting the tone for the new mission. The ruins of New York City provided the perfect battleground for this new phase of the war. Its collapsed buildings and underground tunnels created complex environments that benefited the stealthy predators, but also offered numerous opportunities for ambushes and traps. Mark's team moved through the city with precision, using drones to scout ahead and infrared to spot their targets. Encounters with the beasts were brutal and fast-paced, with both sides suffering losses. But with each engagement, Mark's team learned more about their enemy, adapting their tactics in real time. In a particularly harrowing encounter, a group of beasts ambushed them from the shadows of an abandoned subway station. The team reacted instantly, deploying sonic disruptors that sent the creatures writhing in pain, revealing their positions. Mark led the charge, his rifle steady as he took down the beasts one by one. After the encounter, as they regrouped, Mark received a call from General Harris. "Mark, we're seeing a pattern here. These beasts are being deployed in a last-ditch effort to cut off our supply lines and command centers. You and your team are doing crucial work in keeping them at bay." Mark nodded, acknowledging the weight of their task. "We'll keep pushing them back, General. We're starting to turn fear against them." As the campaign in New York continued, other units around the world reported similar successes. The new enemy was formidable, but not unbeatable. Each victory brought valuable intel that was shared across the global network, honing humanity's response. Back in the field, as Mark watched his team set up for another night of patrols, he felt a surge of pride. They were more than soldiers. They were the shield against annihilation. Their courage and adaptability under his leadership had turned them into a formidable force. As the sun set over the scarred cityscape, Mark prepared for another night of warfare. The battle for Earth was far from over, but each day brought them closer to victory. His resolve was clear. They would fight until the last beast fell, until the last threat was neutralized. Earth would be reclaimed, not just for the living, but in honor of all those who had sacrificed to defend it. As Mark Vincent and his team continued their relentless pursuit of the new, more lethal warbeasts, a remarkable shift was occurring on a global scale. The shared threat from the Zaltraxian invasion, which had pushed humanity to the brink of annihilation, was now pulling it back together in an unprecedented show of unity. In an emergency session of the United Nations, leaders from around the world pledged their support and resources to what had been dubbed the Earth Defense Coalition, EDC. Technologies that had been jealously guarded were now shared freely. Barriers of trade and policy that had once slowed progress fell away in the face of mutual survival. Mark, now promoted to colonel due to his exemplary leadership, was appointed as a tactical advisor to the EDC. From his new position, he was able to influence global military strategies, ensuring that the tactics and technologies developed by his team were implemented worldwide. One of the first initiatives was the establishment of the Integrated Defense Network, IDN, a sophisticated system combining satellites, ground-based sensors, and AI analytics to predict and respond to alien threats more efficiently. The network also facilitated real-time communication and coordination among the Earth's armed forces, turning isolated and disparate groups into a cohesive fighting force. Mark watched from the command center as the new system went live. Screens displayed troop movements, real-time battle data, and predictive simulations of potential alien attacks. It was a far cry from the early days of the invasion when they had been scrambling just to keep up. "Looks like the IDN is operational," remarked General Harris, standing beside Mark at the command center. "This could be the game-changer we need." Mark nodded, his eyes scanning the data streams. "It's more than just technology, General. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we stand together. This is humanity at its best." The unity and improved coordination quickly proved effective. Reports came in of successful operations from all over the globe, where EDC forces, empowered by shared intelligence and resources, were reclaiming territories that had been lost in the initial stages of the invasion. In Africa, coordinated strikes on alien breeding grounds had drastically reduced the number of enemy combatants. In Asia, joint operations had liberated entire cities, with civilians cheering their liberators in the streets. Europe saw the reclamation of historic landmarks, turning what had once been symbols of despair into beacons of hope. But it wasn't just about military success. The EDC also spearheaded efforts to provide humanitarian aid and rebuild infrastructure, helping to heal the scars of war. Mark visited several of these sites, speaking with survivors, sharing their stories of loss and resilience, reinforcing the human aspect of the war. As he stood on the ruins of what had once been a vibrant marketplace, now slowly being rebuilt, Mark felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. "This is why we fight," he told his team. "Not just to win, but to give back what was taken, to restore and improve, to ensure that this never happens again." The global effort continued to gather momentum, with victories increasing and the alien invaders being pushed back further every day. Earth was healing, its people united by their common cause. And at the heart of it all was Mark Vincent, who had become not just a military leader but a symbol of the resilience and unity of the human spirit. As the EDC prepared for what they hoped would be the final offensive to drive the Zaltraxians from Earth, Mark knew the real work would begin after the last shot was fired. The rebuilding of Earth, guided by the lessons of unity and cooperation, promised a brighter future for all its inhabitants. The Zaltraxian mothership, a looming presence in the sky for months, had become a symbol of humanity's oppression and fear. But as Earth's unified forces prepared for the final assault, it transformed into a target of mankind's resilience and defiance. Under the command of Colonel Mark Vincent, a massive coalition force gathered, ready to launch the most ambitious and critical strike of the war. The night before the assault, Mark addressed his troops, a mixture of soldiers from various nations, each bearing their country's insignia alongside the emblem of the Earth Defense Coalition, EDC. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of what was coming palpable in the air. "Tomorrow we face our greatest challenge," Mark began, his voice steady and clear. "But we also seize our greatest opportunity. We have come from all corners of the Earth, not as separate nations, but as one force with one mission, to reclaim our world. Each of you has been chosen not just for your skill and courage, but for your resolve to see this fight through to the end. Together, we will shut down that ship, and with it, the Zaltraxian threat." The plan was complex, involving space and ground forces in a coordinated attack. Space fighters would engage the mothership's defenses, disabling its massive cannons and energy shields, while ground troops would infiltrate the ship, planting explosives at critical junctures to disable it permanently. As dawn broke, the battle commenced. Space fighters darted through the debris and defenses surrounding the mothership, their paths marked by flashes of light and explosions. Meanwhile, Mark led the ground forces, piloting a specially equipped shuttle through the barrage to land in the mothership's hangar bay. Inside the mothership, the environment was alien and disorienting. Gravity fluctuated, and the corridors were lined with bioluminescent panels that pulsed rhythmically. Mark and his team moved quickly, using the maps provided by their intelligence team to navigate the labyrinthine interior. Encounters with Zaltraxian soldiers were brutal and frequent. The alien warriors were formidable, armed with bio-enhanced armor and weaponry. However, Earth soldiers were no less fierce, their training and technology honed by months of relentless combat. Every corner and corridor became a battleground, every victory hard-earned. Mark's team reached the ship's core, a vast chamber housing the primary energy source, a pulsating organic reactor. Here they set the charges, knowing that their activation would cripple the ship permanently. But as they prepared to evacuate, they were confronted by the Zaltraxian commander, a massive, imposing figure who had personally overseen the war on Earth. The battle with the commander was intense and personal. Mark faced the alien, using every bit of his combat experience and personal resolve. The fight was a physical and tactical chess match, with Mark eventually gaining the upper hand, exploiting a moment of overreach by the alien to deliver a decisive blow. With the commander defeated and the charges set, Mark and his team raced back to their shuttle, the ship beginning to quake around them as the countdown neared zero. They launched just as the explosives detonated, the resulting explosion tearing through the mothership. From a safe distance, Mark and his team watched as the mothership fragmented, pieces of it burning away as they entered Earth's atmosphere. Cheers erupted across the globe, broadcasted live to billions who watched with bated breath. As the remnants of the mothership rained down like falling stars, Mark felt a profound sense of accomplishment and relief. The war was over. Earth was safe. Returning to Earth as heroes, Mark and his fellow soldiers were met with parades and celebrations. But for Mark, the true reward was seeing the world whole again, its people united and its future promising. They had not only survived an alien threat but had found a new way forward together as one Earth.